Cradle, Dogs of Fount, Chapter 22. This barn was creepy even in Arturo's opinion. The shadows of the night made the hanging saw blades' teeth grow and shrink, almost as if they were biting. You could smell the metal of all the equipment in this creaky barn. The general noted there were automobile tools there as well. The axle wrenches hung on the rack and shined with grease when the light caught it. Hyatt was going to be here any minute, and if the general knew the man, he'd spill his guts for him. There was movement outside, and then it suddenly stopped just 5 feet from the large barn door. It was statically silent for a handful of moments, and then another shift in the turf. Silence again. Arturo grasped the pistol in his back holster just as the door began to slide open. The figure appeared and walked in the light. The light showed Hyatt, and then he went dark again as he closed the door behind himself. They looked at each other in the darkness for a moment. Followed? The general asked. Didn't get any reading, sir, Hyatt answered. It's been a week. What you got? Arturo asked. Hyatt didn't speak for what seemed like a whole minute there in the dark. The general sensed more defiance coming from the colonel and knew he had to break him down again. Listen here. Listen to me. You took my marriage and ruined it. You took my trust in you, and you blew your damn nose in it, Hyatt proclaimed. Another silent minute. Hyatt, not once did you ask me why I joined the military. I was poor growing up. It was just my mom, my brother, and my sister. I used to cut school and do drugs. I was an addict, and I couldn't afford treatment. The day I graduated higher school, I OD'd and almost died. When I woke up in the hospital, I was completely grateful. My life was crap, but I was happy. I still had one. So I promised God if I recovered, I would swear off drugs forever and serve my nation. And that's what I did, and I met the most beautiful woman I've ever seen and was blessed to marry her. He caught his breath. Do you see now? Do you see what you have done to me? Arturo slipped and tasted the pain through the times Ruth had left him. However, he quickly put a lid back on that jar. The general placed one hand on Hyatt's shoulder, squeezed and nodded. He took back his hand after a pat and waited a moment. Most of the week was just orientation meetings and minor training. Mr. Oberhill really doesn't trust you, sir, Hyatt began. The general knew this but stayed quiet, hoping for something he could use. He knew it may have been too soon, but that didn't snuff out the anticipation. There's one thing that blew my mind though, sir. Oberhill actually met with a man from China in a chamber at the hall. It had been rumored for the longest that China was a huge civilization still thriving, but no one had ever had any known contact with them. The general's stomach tightened at the possibilities. I have no idea what they spoke about, but I may be let in later down the line, Hyatt concluded. And that was all I got this week. Good work, Arturo said. We have to leave now. With what you just told me, you are a more sensitive issue than I had assumed. Take care. Wait 5 minutes and then leave, okay? Yes, sir. Arturo left the creaking barn door open and tried to come up with a plan based on possible contingencies. It had been a couple weeks since the rather brief first meeting. Tonight had been building up ever since. There had been rumors on base that only high-level officers were privy to. Seemingly minor stories in the paper nipped at the general's suspicions. A story head near the back of the paper a handful of days ago read, "Could we be approaching a new age of exploration?" He didn't know why that got to him so much. On top of that, it hadn't been safe for Hyatt to meet him and break cover all this time. Tonight was imperative though. The general was taking a risk camping at this corner. The night was foggy and it seemed to make sense after such a humid day. This was the way the colonel came at the first meeting, and to his knowledge it was the best route. However, the general had droned Hyatt while he was leaving the office, and it was obvious he had a shadow tonight. The man wore a fedora and dark clothes, and was good about blending in wherever the colonel looked over his shoulder. Things would get messy if Hyatt deviated tonight, and the general was sure Hyatt knew something this time. Arturo was rooted behind the corner of a romantically designed building. Old stones, flourished concrete work, gargoyles, and of course the vines made this building a photographer's dream. Alas, the roads were completely empty and silent, and the general could almost hear his breath coming into and out of his nostrils. A car hadn't been by for a long 7 minutes, and the last person on foot he saw was a maid that came out the front door of the adjacent flat, and she quickly went back inside, probably creeped out. Still, he waited and convinced that this peace was going to be broached in a few or a handful of minutes. The fog drifted down the street like a vixen's flowing dress, and was illuminated misty gray by the LED street lamps. The general's eyelids were getting particularly heavy, which made no sense because he was standing on his feet, but it was evidence that he could only keep up this vigilance so long. He sucked in a deep breath and was surprised how quickly sleep overcame him. Something snapped him out of it. Hyatt was 50 yards down the street jogging away, and a man was laying unconscious in the street, apparently hit by the light blue Higgs bolt which was speeding away. He looked at the driver, seeing her through the rear windshield, and it was indeed Ruth. He looked back to the man in the street and looked around him and made out the fedora. It was the correct target. The general stepped in the dewy grass and approached the open barn door, gun drawn. He heard panting, but couldn't determine the voice behind it. He didn't call out to whoever was inside because that could make him into an opposing agent. He stepped through the fog and into the black barn. He saw a figure standing near the middle of the barn floor, and the person was bearing no weapon. "Hyatt?" the general whispered. "Sir," he huffed. "What the is going on?" He was still catching his breath. "You had a tail, and he was taking out. Look, we don't have much time, so let me in on everything and then we'll split out of here." Hyatt was beginning to get his wind. The general thought Hyatt was in better shape than that, but it was a mile and a half from the scene, and if he ran all that way... Oberhill authorized the movement of millions in gold to the Chinese. I chartered a long-range aircraft from the Hall's private fleet to go across the Atlantic. They have a full legitimate nation where old China is, or whatever the heck. What is the gold for? I don't know exactly, but while Oberhill was on his screen, I kept hearing the term market. Anything else? The general asked. Oh yeah, I heard them say Cyphus' name more than a few times. He may be in on this deal with the gold. Okay, let's get out of here. I'll be in contact, the general ordered. He left the barn and went through the field into the tree line. He looked back and saw Hyatt head for someone's backyard, probably going to cut through and back to the city streets. Arturo had no idea where to start, so he left it to go over until he arrived home. But knowing himself, he knew things would come together anyway on the way home.